My team is about to start a project to launch a new website. With a pre-mortem, I would tell the team we have time travel to the following year and the website has been a terrible failure. Hey, it's Bilal, and this is Deep Sea, the podcast about seeing the world more deeply. Having worked in many different organizations, I've seen a recurrent pattern of initiatives that start with great gusto and end in absolute failure. Often, the outcome was obvious, yet we still went ahead with it anyway. I could give many examples, but most common ones revolve around some new IT project that will apparently solve all the problems of the organization. So what makes us come together and make such terrible decisions? We're supposed to be well-educated, experienced, and rational. Well, I say we're supposed to be rational, but we know that the reality is that we're not. It turns out that we have 4 critical biases that lead us to make bad decisions. These are being over-optimistic on our projects, struggling to think realistically about the long term, having blind spots on downside risks, and finally, believing the absence of others speaking up means that there is a consensus on the course of action. Sound familiar? Yes, we suffer from these all the time. Thankfully, there is a technique to overcome these. It's called the pre-mortem. This idea was first coined by Gary Klein in the Harvard Business Review in 2007, and later Nobel Prize-winning Daniel Kahneman deemed it as the best way for teams to make decisions. As the name suggests, it is connected to a postmortem. In medicine, a postmortem is conducted after the death of a patient to determine the cause of death and learn from any mistakes. Meanwhile, a pre-mortem is done before a project starts, but with the assumption that it will fail. It's a form of what's called prospective hindsight. For example, my team is about to start a project to launch a new website. With a pre-mortem, I would tell the team we have time travel to the following year and the website has been a terrible failure. Now, it's the job of everyone in the team to come up with detailed thoughts on what led to the disaster. The beauty of this approach is that it overcomes the many shortcomings I mentioned earlier. The optimism bias is removed as we're talking about a failed outcome. The difficulty of thinking long-term, which could involve so many futures and uncertainties, is resolved by narrowing the scenario down to one and asking for a detailed story of what led to it. The blind spot to downside risk is overcome as, well, we're only focusing on the downside. Finally, the illusion of consensus is shattered as everyone has to speak up in a way that is non-consensus. We can apply this to distinct projects, to investment ideas, or even to softer issues like team dynamics, such as when the team makeup changes, we could talk about what could go wrong in the team. There are also different ways of doing pre-mortems, and I include a link to some templates in my show notes. But whatever approach you take, I can assure you that pre-mortems will avoid some catastrophic errors. You can get more details in the show notes, which can be found on my blog, bilalhafiz.com. Please tell a friend about the podcast, leave a rating on iTunes, Stitcher, and Spotify, or wherever you go for your podcast. You can follow me on Twitter. My handle is @bilalhafiz123 on Facebook, or you can follow me on my blog. I'll be back soon, so tune in then.